everyone, and welcome. And tonight we are going to go on a little bit of a journey and opening our minds and our hearts to understand one of the most greatest essentials in Judaism and Jewish teachings, and the source of what is pain all about. What is what is our pain telling us? We are in a time in the last 6 months that we are experiencing a tremendous amount of pain. If you have a Jewish heart and you are aware of what's happening within the Jewish world, and it's not just happening in a small area in the Middle East, in Israel, it's happening right here, right now, with each and every one of us, witnessing the turmoil in the world. And there is a great discomfort, if we could use it mildly, that we are all experiencing in the last couple of months. And it's inviting us to open up our eyes to what is the teachings, what's the wisdom behind pain. And it's very much connected to the Parsha of this week. Parsha of this week is Parsha's Metzora. Metzora means a person who becomes inflicted with a form of a psoriasis that makes him, in English they call it leprosy, but it's not really the leprosy from the disease leprosy where it is extremely contagious. It used to exist in places where there was low hygiene. The leprosy of the Torah is a spiritual sickness and disease that shows up on your physical body. And the story of the Metzora, the events that the Metzora is experiencing, today we're going to learn about the profound expression of what is the body telling when it breaks out with a psoriasis. A revolutionary teaching by the great masters of the Kabbalah, a revolutionary teaching by the masters of Hasidut philosophy, and give us a whole new understanding in the wisdom of trauma, in the understanding of what is the messaging that are sitting beneath the pain. Not that we want any pain, not that we are inviting any pain, God forbid. We don't want to have any pain, any suffering. But there is a great wisdom, there's great messaging, there is some really profound teachings that our pain is there to tell us. And this Parsha of this week really opens up a new channel of understanding. What is the messaging behind the pain that a human being is experiencing? Last week, Shabbos, we were sitting around the Kiddush table. Those of you who come to Shul here know after Shabbat services in the morning, we have a circle that we sit together and we eat Shabbat lunch. And I was using the word dis-ease. And about what's going on in the world is a certain atmosphere of dis-ease. And Michael Goldman, who was here in the class, corrected me. And he said, it's not dis-ease, it's what was the word he was using? Michael, turn on your microphone. What did you say? It's not dis-ease, was it?
I don't recall. I don't recall what I said.
Something like,
I remember you said you were using it deliberately. So
yeah. So you were correcting me. I think you said unease or something like this. And I said, no, it's
probably,
this.
yeah, it could have been. Yes.
You said it's unease. And I said, no, it's disease. Because the word disease that we are looking at sickness is not just a word that just says disease. Disease is dis-ease. It is something that is not ease. There's something that's happening within us that causes us to be awakened. Our body is sending us a signal. There's an alarm ringing. And the world is experiencing now a certain realm of dis-ease that we don't have to be great mystics to understand that there is something profoundly changing right now within the old systems from heaven to earth and back in these times that we are in now, and experienced that during COVID in a tremendous, powerful way that I don't think that we yet even began to process what the world went through at that time. And right now, since October 7th, this is something that is happening to each and every one of us, and we still don't have the words and the understanding and even begin to process what this pain and hurt is messaging us. But there is something very special that happens within this pain, that the story of the Metzora opens up our hearts and our minds to understand that there is wisdom, that there is a profound message that pain carries with it. And each and every one of us who's in here tonight or listening to the class at a certain point, I really feel you're going to be able to connect in your own personal life. If you want to share or not share, but in your own personal life as well, noticing that when I'm experiencing some form of pain, there is actually something changing and moving and shifting in my consciousness, in my awareness. And it actually not just turns me into a better person, but my entire system evolves as a result of that. So I want to jump in straight to the topic of tonight. And the topic that I shared on the email is, let's call it intimacy. Now, the immediate association of intimacy by most modern people is sexuality. And that's how we call it in the more refined name. And we call it intimacy. Now, the difference between sexuality and intimacy is sexuality is the doing, intimacy is the being. You can do sex, but you could only be intimate. You can't do intimacy. Okay? Meaning to say, God Almighty looks at us as human beings, not as human doings. Each and every one of us is a human being. And as a human being, you do a lot of amazing things. So being intimate will express itself by husband and wife, by two people who love each other, in the process of doing something that the world calls sexuality, and they call it intimacy. In our relationship with God, there is a lot of doing, a lot of mitzvahs that we're supposed to do. There's a lot of not doing, yes doing. There is a lot of doing that's happening. But more than anything else, there is the being. And God Almighty called human beings in the Torah, he called them human beings. Adam, the name, the original title for mankind, was Adam. Adam means human being. In this week's Parsha, when God Almighty is talking about leprosy, about the Metzora, suddenly the title Adam is being used. Adam kihye be'or besaro, a human being who has in the skin of his flesh, se'es or sapachat or baheret, gives all the description, 72 types. There are 72 types of leprosy that can happen within the skin of a person. But the Torah uses the term Adam. Adam means human being. And within the titles of human being in biblical Hebrew, there are 4 titles how a human being is called. There is Adam, Ish, Gever, Enosh. Now I'm going to explain each one of those 4. Enosh is basically a description of the most primitive reptilian part of a human being. The word Enosh in Hebrew means helpless. Some will say even hopeless. It's a human being within his ultimate weakness as a helpless creature, needy of the help and support of nurturing parents, peers, caretakers. That's the title Enosh. The next title is Gever. The word Gever means someone who strengthens himself. And that refers to the title of a human being overcoming his Enosh personality, meaning to say, in nature, you are very weak and very helpless and very needy. But then there is a part of a human being called a Gever, that is the muscle tone that a person develops physically, emotionally, intellectually, to be able to overcome those weaknesses and that helplessness that he has. Then there is a higher name. Again, this is a hierarchy of names. Enosh is the lowest. Higher than that is Gever. Higher than that is Ish. Ish means someone who has a emotional body. He has feelings. He has relationships. He has connections. He reaches out to build friendships, a marriage, raising children, building community. That is the level of Ish, the way you are interacting with others and forming all sorts of alliances and relationships with other people. The highest name, the highest title of a human being, well, that is the title that resembles, where the human being resembles the image of God in this world, is the title Adam. The word Adam in Hebrew means from the word resemble, Adama, Adameh. Adameh means I resemble, Dome, I look like. At the same time, the word Adam also means Adama, that means earth. We spoke about it many times, the two translation in the same word refers that within the Adam, within the human, there is the combination of heaven and earth and heaven. So in one hand, you are the resemblance of God, and on the other end, you are his ambassador in the lowest places on planet Earth. So you have the both parts in you, being in one end the highest of the high, but you get to influence even the lowest of the low. So going back to this thought, that the title Adam, the human being, that is the greatest title that a human being has. And it's interesting that when it comes to talk about the Metzora, that the Metzora is actually someone who is a very, very unhealthy person, not just physically unhealthy. The Metzora is a person who is spiritually unhealthy. The Metzora, the Talmud tells us that the reason why a person receives leprosy, Metzora, is because the word Metzora means motzi ra. Motzi ra means in Hebrew, he expresses evil. He speaks out bad. This is meant for a person. This is a punishment that's given to a person who speaks badly about others. Someone who gets into other people's business. Someone who gossips. Someone who talks lashon hara. This is the person who gets punished with this punishment of Metzora. And by the way, that punishment comes in different layers. It begins, first of all, with a certain discoloration of the walls of the house, and eventually it moves to discoloration on clothing. And then when it gets really bad, there are 72 types of leprosy on the actual skin of the body. And depends how repetitive, how bad was that evil speaking of the person, and how that will accelerate that tzara. Now, this doesn't exist anymore today. This was something that existed only at the times of the temple, the tabernacle. But there is a lot to learn from this tsaras, from this historical disease, who is the only disease that's described in the entire Torah. Now, historically, we have some great individuals who become Metzora. First of all, we have Moshe himself. You know the story of Moses and the burning bush? Everybody knows the story. When Moshe meets God at the burning bush, and God is asking Moshe to go and speak to Pharaoh to redeem the Jewish people. And what does Moshe say? One of the things that Moshe says is, they are not going to believe me. The Jewish people are not going to believe me that you, God, sent me to take them out of Egypt. And God Almighty says to Moshe, Moshe, put your hands in your bosom. And Moshe puts his hands in his bosom, and he says, now take it out. And he takes out his hands, and his hand is covered in the psoriasis, in the tsarat. And this is a punishment for Moshe for speaking badly about the Jewish people, for putting a judgment on them, saying to God that the Jewish people don't believe in him. He gets punished right away because he spoke badly. He gets punished right away with tsaras. Now we have later on the story of Miriam, Moshe's sister. Miriam speaks with her brother Aaron regarding Moshe. She's telling Aaron that we all went home after the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. We all went back to cohabit with our spouses, and Moshe never went home. He has a beautiful wife. Why isn't he going home? Isn't God speaking to all of us? And she's speaking to her brother Aaron about Moshe, and what happens at that moment? Miriam becomes covered in leprosy. And the Jewish people are waiting for 7 days until she cures from her leprosy. So we see that the examples of leprosy within the Torah is not just ordinary people. We don't see some bad people getting leprosy. We're reading about Moshe receiving leprosy, Miriam receiving leprosy, this great prophets, great characters of people. It's already telling you that this whole leprosy thing is a very mysterious, but at the same time, a very telling form of a disease. Now, just to divert our attention for a moment, the Mashiach, King Mashiach, in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, the Talmud brings a story. There was a sage, his name was Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. He went to the cave where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried. And he wants to enter the cave. And the Talmud says he sees Elijah the prophet protecting the entrance to the gate. And he turns to Elijah and he says, Elijah, when is Mashiach going to come? Now you have to remember, this is the time when the Romans are in the highest type of brutality. The Jewish people are being brutally anguished by the hands of the Roman. And he turns to Elijah the prophet and he says, when is Mashiach going to come? And Elijah the prophet says to him, you know what? You want to speak to Mashiach? You can do it yourself. Mashiach sits at the gates of the city of Rome. by the entrance of the city, there is a little area there where all the people who have leprosy are outside of the city. And the way you're going to know who Mashiach is all the people with leprosy change their bandages around their psoriasis and their boils. They change it all at once. Mashiach, on the other end, is a lot more modest. He removes one bandage and he puts another one. Go there and speak to him. And the Talmud says Rabbi Shua ben Levi traveled to Rome and he went over there where all the people with leprosy were sitting. And he meets this sickly man covered in psoriasis and tsaras. And this is the King Mashiach that was supposed to be the one to redeem the people. And he turns to Mashiach and he says, when are you coming? And Mashiach says to him, I'll tell you. I'm coming today. Yeshua ben Levi is too excited. He just heard from Mashiach that he's coming today. Redemption is coming. The day passed and no redemption happened. So he comes back to the gate and he asks him, you just told me that you're coming today. What happened? He said, yep. The verse says, Hayom im bekolo tishmau. Today I will come if you listen to God's voice. Every day is a potential day for Mashiach to come. So I was ready to come today, but maybe tomorrow will be the day. So we see from the story, without going into through all the details here, that Mashiach himself suffers from leprosy. Now, the Holy Temple is also hinted in the story of this week's Parsha regarding leprosy. The verse says regarding the person with leprosy who has in him the psoriasis, his garments should be torn. He should be called impure twice. Says the Talmud, the Yalkut Shimoni brings it. The leopard refers to the temple. The temple is called the house of leprosy. That is covered in psoriasis refers to the houses of idolatry that they are built over the space where the temple was. The garments is torn refers to the holy garments of the Kohen who are being torn and ripped away from him. Impure, he should be called. It says double the word impure. Tamei, says the Talmud is referring to the first temple and the second temple. Again, an indication that the whole state of tsaras, the whole state of leprosy, is not just given to ordinary people and ordinary events. Moshe es tsaras, Miriam es tsaras. Temple is called a house covered in tsaras. Mashiach suffers from tsaras. It just lets you know over here that the mystery that we give that tsaras, the person who has that leprosy, we call him Adam. The highest title of a human being is being given to who? To someone who is speaking gossip, someone who speaks bad things on others. He gets such a high title. Very mysterious, very interesting. Now, who is the one who is deciding if you are pure or impure, if that psoriasis is a psoriasis that you become impure to it? The Torah tells us that the person who has the leprosy has to go to the Kohen. The Kohen is the one who checks out your skin. He looks at the discoloration, and he is the one who says, is this one of the 72 impurities, or is this some type of a skin tag or skin psoriasis that you are suffering from? Now, is the Kohen a dermatologist? Is the Kohen learning dermatology? Why Kohen? Why is the Kohen as this yichas that he can be the one to determine and decide? But this is what the Torah says. The Torah says you have to bring him to the Kohen. Instead of bringing him to Dr. Levy, Dr. Levy is our local doctor here in Seattle, a dermatologist. Don't bring him to Dr. Levy, bring him to Dr. Cohen. Dr. Levy is not good enough. Dr. Levy is a very honorable dermatologist, but he's a Levy. We need to get to Dr. Cohen. And until you don't get to Dr. Cohen, we're not going to know what the story with that skin discoloration. Why a Cohen? Why do we bring him to the Cohen? Now, the reason why we talk about this topic, especially this is our last class before Passover, because next week, Thursday night, we're going to be all busy with our special celebration. And then the week after that already is Pesach. So we're going to have a little bit of a break. And I chose to speak about this topic today is because it really touches on the core of the spiritual meaning of the holiday of Pesach. Now, the Zohar says that each one of the holidays coincides with one of the senses of a person. For example, Rosh Hashanah is the mitzvah to listen, hearing the shofar. So on Rosh Hashanah, we are working with our sense of hearing. Hanukkah is the holiday of visualization. We have to look at the candles. We're not allowed to touch them or use them. Ella lirosan bilvad. We have to look at the candles, and the holiday is experienced through the visual, seeing. Shavuos is the holiday of the mind, understanding, learning Torah. Sukkot is the holiday of kinesthetics, being in the frame of the sukkah, holding the lulav and esrog. It's all about the body being in entirety within the space of the sukkah. The person is not just hearing or seeing, the person actually is fully experiencing with every part of his body the atmosphere of the sukkah. So it's more of a kinesthetic experience. Pesach is the holiday of speech. The mitzvah of Pesach is lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, to talk about the exodus of Egypt. The obligation of the holiday is to say it. Ask the question. Say the Haggadah. Read the words. Bring out everything within a verbal expression. If you are sitting by yourself in the Seder, you still have to verbalize the story. You still have to say the content of the day. Mitzvah aleinu lesaper. We have a mitzvah to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim in the night of Pesach. Now, the word Pesach, says the Zohar, comes from the word Pesach. Pe means a mouth. Sach means speaks. On Pesach, the obligation is our mouth. The matzah eaten through our mouth. The moror through our mouth. The 4 cups of wine through our mouth. Speaking the story from our mouth. Pesach, we are working with our ability to speak. And interesting enough, the Zohar says, we know that Moses was having a speech impediment. When God Almighty asks Moses to go speak to Pharaoh, what is Moshe's first excuse? Ki kvat peh vekvad lashon anochi. I have heavy mouth, heavy tongue. I'm having a hard time speaking. Choose someone, my brother, who knows how to speak better than me. Now, what happened with Moshe's speech impediment? What happened to it? Did anything change? Says the Zohar that in the moment Exodus happened, Moshe's speech impediment was completely cured. And he gave the Torah and he taught the Torah and he was speaking to the Jewish people, never stuttered again. All the stuttering, all the stifled speaking, all of that was during the times of exile. Moshe couldn't speak. But in the moment we left Egypt, the ability of speaking became fully functioning by Moshe. He was able to articulate and verbalize and teach. And Moshe is called until today Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our Rebbe. A Rebbe without speaking is not a Rebbe. A Rebbe has to be able to speak and teach and speak clearly. So Moshe heals his speech problem on Pesach. And each and every one of us on the holiday of Pesach, we get in touch with our power of speech in a very religious way, in a very spiritual way. And it's interesting that every year during this time of Pesach, we read the Parsha who talks about a person who uses his speech in an unhealthy way. We're talking about a person who is using his mouth to speak bad about other people and the illnesses and the sickness that he brings upon himself, on his house, on his clothing, speaking bad about someone else. Something about our speech that is getting corrected during this time of the year, and it's a good opportunity to dive in a drop deeper. I just came to me a story about the title Adam. The Talmud says a very interesting statement. It says only Jewish people can have this leprosy. Why? Says the Talmud, a very, very painful statement, but I want you to bear with me till you hear the end of it. The Talmud says, Atem kruim Adam ve'ein umay so'ilam kruim Adam. You, the Jewish people, are called Adam, but the nations of the world are not called Adam. So those of you who know about the Bailis court case, it was a court case, the last blood libel that happened in Russia with Mendel Bailis. So Mendel Bailis was let me give you a little bit of a background on this so you can appreciate a little bit more. So it was in the year 1911, there was a body of a Ukrainian boy, a Christian Ukrainian boy, 12-year-old, and he was found next to Kiev. And basically, it was a blood libel that was being given that the Jewish people killed this boy using his blood. Now, 4 months before the body was even discovered, there was a Jew named Menachem Mendel Bailis who worked at a factory next to it. He sat in jail for about 2 years. And there was a big court case about this Mendel Bailis, if he was if he had a connection to the murder, did he kill him? He was a father to 5 children. You could read about the story of Mendel Bailis. It took a lot of press at that time. One of the things that happened in that, there was the time when a lot of anti-Semitism was out in the open. And one of the questions that was brought in front of the court was this Talmudic statement where the Talmud says that you, the Jewish people, are called Adam, but the nation of the world are not called Adam. And he says, your Talmud is full of a anti-non-Jewish rhetoric, saying that you guys are called human, but the rest of the world is not human. And one of the rabbis who was there answered a very true answer. He didn't try to excuse or abolish anything. He just said a very true answer. He said, there are 4 titles how to call human beings. There is Ish, Gever, Enosh, and Adam. Now, each one of the 3 other titles, you can say it in plural. You can say, how do you say multiple Ish? You say Anashim. Multiple Gever, you say Gvarim. multiple enosh, you could say enoshim, but there is no multiple word of saying Adam. You can only say Adam. You don't say Adamim. Doesn't exist such a word. And he says the reason why the title Adam doesn't have a plural is because the title Adam refers to one organism. Each of the other names refers to a person's parts. The title Adam refers to a human being part of one organism, an image of God. Like God is one, there's a certain oneness within a person. What the Talmud is referring to say is that the Jewish people are one organism. When one Jew gets hurt, every Jew gets hurt. When one Jew is doing well, every Jew is doing well. It's not because we're just taking pride in each other. It's because the Jewish people are truly one organism. So when one of us is in trouble, all of us are in trouble. And he was basically telling him that the meaning of the word Adam, and this is what the Talmud is referring to, is there is no other nation in the world who is considered one organism. Separate people, separate last name, different places in the world, but somehow we're all interconnected, interlocked in one destiny, in one relationship. And this is what the title Adam means. And this is what it means. The Talmud is basically saying, you, the Jewish people, are a Adam, but no one else is a Adam. Meaning to say, not to say that no one else is human, God forbid, but rather to say is no other people carry that type of a one organism existence. Anyways, I want to walk over to the question that we asked before, why go to the Kohen? We'll start from that point. Why go to the Kohen? Why don't you go to Dr. Levy? Remember that question that we asked? Dr. Levy is a good dermatologist. I actually had some of my own family visiting him, and he was very good, even though most dermatologists don't know what they're talking about. They just tell you, put this on your skin and come back in 2 weeks, see how it is. Then they give you something else to put on your skin, come back in 2 weeks. I think dermatologists usually have no idea what they're talking about. This is my personal opinion, but Dr. Levy is different. Okay, this is just a little humor on the side. Why go to the Kohen? The Rebbe teaches a very powerful teaching. He says, what is a Kohen? Here we have Michael Sterling, who is a Kohen, and we have Paula Berger, who is a daughter of a Kohen, a Bas Kohen. This is two people who are from the Kohanim in our community. And we want to talk a moment about you. What does it mean to be a Kohen? How does the Torah view you? So a Kohen is called Ish HaChesed, a man of kindness. Kohanim, their job is to be people who carry love and kindness. Kohanim, when they bless the Jewish people, just the idea of them being the ones blessing the Jewish people, it's already telling what type of a character you're supposed to have when you bless others. You could only bless others when your heart is full of love. And they say it in their blessing, Shekidishanu begdushosai shel Aharon, vetzivanu levorech es Amo Yisrael be'ahava. And the Talmud says, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah you're supposed to bless them with love. It only says in the Torah that you're supposed to bless them. But the Kohanim, when they get up there to say their blessing, they say, God commanded us to bless the Jewish people with love. It doesn't say anywhere that you're supposed to do it with love. It's an obligation. But obviously, there is no blessing that can be given unless your heart is full of love. HaKohen is a descendant of the very first Kohen. That is Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen, Hillel tells us what Aaron HaKohen was. Aaron HaKohen was a Ohev Shalom, a lover of peace, someone who pursued peace, someone who brings people closer to God, to the Torah. A Kohen is supposed to be a person that his heart is overflowing with love, and this is why the Talmud says, a Kohen who somehow murdered someone even by a mistake, he can't give the blessing anymore. Kohen Shaharag es hanefesh, afilu b'shoigeg, cannot do this blessing anymore. If you experienced somewhere in your life love being stifled, you cannot be the one to imbue people and give people the blessing of love. A Kohen has to have a pure heart. A Kohen has to be someone, as Moshe turns to God and he says, in the burning bush, he says, but I have an older brother. You're giving me a job to be the leader of the Jewish people. I have an older brother than me. And God Almighty says, you're going to see, you're going to go tell your older brother that you got a job to be the leader of the Jewish people. You're going to see his reaction. Vero'acho v'samach b'liboy. He will see you and he will hear that you became the leader and he will rejoice in your heart. He's not jealous. He's not a person who carries one bad vein in his body. If he's going to hear that you're doing great, he's going to be so proud of you. He's going to partner with you. You know, sometimes we hear someone is doing well and we ask, why this one got an upgrade and me didn't? Why not me? He says, your brother Aaron is different. Aaron is a lover. And someone who loves, what's the greatest expression of being a lover? Seeing the good in another person. When you love someone, the only thing you can see is the beauty, the potential, the incredible light that another person shines. Moshe says to God, my brother will get upset. He's older than me. And God says, you don't know your brother. Your brother is love. He will be so glad that you are living up to the potential that you have. This is what a man of love is. He blesses others. He causes others to shine and be bright. When a person breaks out with this type of a psoriasis, what does he need? Who is going to be the one to declare if you are actually impure? Something so denigrating to tell a person, you are tummy. You will be excommunicated from the community for 7 days, and you're going to be called a tummy, and you're going to be living outside of the community with the leopard lives outside of the gates. Who can say a word like this to another Jew that it wouldn't hurt that person's feelings and break his dignity? The only one who can call out someone's is someone who is intimately in love with someone else. Someone who can see the human, the Adam in the other person. If you cannot see the other person as defiled and as destroyed and as broken, and you don't see the light that shines between the cracks of that person, you don't see the ultimate Adam within that person, you cannot cast any judgment. So the man shows up to Dr. Cohen. He comes to the person who radiates with love. And he says, look what's going on with me. I'm breaking out with this terrible disease. Am I okay? And we could only trust the Kohen, who will take a good look. And not only he's going to say, yeah, everything is fine. Yeah, you're good. Don't worry about it. Go home, be happy. No. He will able to introduce that person to the great potential. The dead wound is not just some form of an impurity, some form of a disease, some form of a brokenness. You will able to prove to that person that that is an expression of the great qualities that you have. And instead of using the gifts that you have in a negative form, instead of using the power of speech to gossip on others, to speak badly about other people, use that beautiful gift in a pure and holy way, that Kohen would be able to purify and elevate that person and bringing up to the awareness, you are a human being. You carry a Tselem Elokim. You carry the image of God. Express that. Purify that. The only one we can trust is the Kohen. The person doesn't need a dermatologist. He needs a spiritual psychologist. It's not a skin problem. It's a spiritual expression of something that is happening with inside the person that is waiting to be expressed. There is a gift of a person that person somehow lost his way in the expression of that gift. The Talmud says when they were looking at a discoloration of the wall of the house, and they had to break up that piece from the house to remove the impurity. And the Talmud says there was special reason why it happened. There was treasures hidden behind the wall. God Almighty says that when you arrive to the land of Israel, you're going to see this coloration of the wall because the Canaanites would hide their treasures in the wall. And by you breaking away that wall that's officially impure, you're going to find those treasures that the Canaanites are hidden in the wall. Obviously, the mystical understanding behind it is pretty obvious. When you remove the impurity from a person, there's a treasure sitting right there. When a person struggles with unhealthy relationships, if it's a form of sex addiction or a form of porn addiction, this is a quest of a person wanting to love and connect. He just doesn't know how. He just doesn't know with who. When a person who is fallen into alcoholism, there's a person inside who is crying out for expression of creativity. There's a deep pain that alcohol became his remedy, his soothing, his euphoric belief that somehow if I drink, I'll feel better. Things will be different. There's an understanding that beneath that shameful and painful expression of that disease sits a person who has a gift to share. It's just there is no space for that gift to be expressed because of the pain and the agony and the stifleness that that person is experiencing. Give him an opportunity. Bring him to the Kohen. They can liberate him and show him that you don't have to follow that unhealthy pattern, unhealthy behavior. You don't have to act out. You just have to connect. Your heart is searching for love. And it became easy to replace that love with a bar of chocolate. Poisonous bar of chocolate. Just allow yourself to connect with a healthy relationship, and you're going to see how amazing you're doing. This is not a space for a disease form of a environment to discuss what am I sick with. It's rather a place for a Kohen, someone who can see the light within what is shaking within that person, that is waiting to be awakened, waiting to be realized. And the Kohen is able to open up the channel and let you actualize your potential in a healthy and a beautiful way. Mashiach is called the one who has leprosy. And the reason is because what is Mashiach? Mashiach is the time when all our dreams and our aspiration will become actualized. And until that point, the only way it's showing up in the world is through brokenness, through tsaras. The temple. The temple is the place where the greatest expression of light and love exists in this world. And when the temple is destroyed, it's called the house of leprosy. Because this is the greatest form of holiness, stifled, unexpressed, unrevealed. It's Moshe's stutter before the great Exodus, where suddenly he is able to start speaking. When we see brokenness, when we see struggle, we got to put on the glasses of a Kohen and to see what is the message here. What is the wisdom? What is the light that is trying to shine through? And the only way it gets expressed is through violence, through disease, disease. The Kohen's glasses, the Kohen's spectacles, the Kohen's way of looking at the world opens us up to a new understanding, to a new awareness, to be able to see, that's what they are screaming. It was one year, Simchas Torah, 1954, there was Hakafot in 770, Eastern Parkway, the Rebbe Synagogue, they were dancing. And nearby, there was a club where Jewish children were dancing as well that night, not really dancing with the Torah. And the Rebbe was talking about this, and he said, the Jewish soul knows that tonight is a night to dance. And they have chosen to dance this way. We are doing the dance the way we're supposed to do. But everybody is dancing. The Kohen, the Rebbe, was able to put on the glasses of Aaron HaKohen and to see in those young people who were dancing on Simchas Torah in a nightclub the expression of the joy of what Simchas Torah means to a Jew. Tonight is a night to dance. I don't know exactly how, I don't know where, I'm lost, but I know I need to dance tonight. The only one who could see that, the Rebbe spoke about the hippies during the 60s when the great movements of the hippies in all over the United States. And the Rebbe spoke about when people were trying to silence them and they were looking at them at people with strange ideas. And the Rebbe says, this is people who are questing for a relationship with God in the most unique way possible. Let's give it to them. Let's give them the opportunity to connect to God in their own unique way. Let's open up the doors for that. The Kohen put on his glasses. He saw the potential. He saw the love. He saw everything that everybody else was willing to look away from. He saw beneath the person who is gossiping. He saw not just a Metzora, a dirty man, a defiled person. He saw a person with a great soul who just needs to have a channel of experience. There's a treasure behind that wall. Open up the channel and you'll find the treasure. Pesach is a night when the gates of heaven open up and each and every one of us gets an opportunity to get out. We're able to speak up. We're able to finally express our true being, whatever name you are, whatever one of the four sons of the Haggadah, no matter what you feel, am I the wise one? Or even let's say you're coming to the Seder or with that shy, lurking, I am the wicked one. Or I'm the simpleton. I'm the one who doesn't know how to ask. You belong to that Seder table. It's a time for you to speak up. And even if you don't know how to ask, let the Father make you and support you so you can finally speak up and ask your question. Comes the Parsha of the week and teaches us each and every one of you, each and every one of us carries great potential. The noise that you hear is just a call for love. The violence that you see means there's a great light coming through. Some of us are given the glasses to be able to see the light that's coming through. Some of us have to stand there bewildered and wonder, like, when is the light finally coming through? When is it going to happen? But we see in the Parsha of the week, you just need to step up to that level of a Kohen. Just put on the glasses of love. Start looking at the world from a place of an open heart. and you will just find out the truth. There is only two sounds in this world. There's a sound of people giving love, and there's a sound of people asking for love, questing for love. And the sound of questing for love sometimes sounds so violent, so miserable, so upsetting, full of anger, disappointment, gossip. That person just needs a hug. The person just needs to know, yes, you are being loved. Just take a deep breath in. Everything will be okay. The Haftorah tells us the story of four people with leprosy who were sitting outside of the gate. This is a story that happens during Prophet Elisha. Elisha is the student of Elijah. And Elisha, the prophet, he, at his time, there is the chief general of the army of Aram, comes to him because he has a leprosy, him and his children. And Elisha gives them a remedy, says, go immerse yourself in the Jordan River. Those of you who know the Bible know the story really well. And he goes with his, and he immerses himself in the Jordan River. And what happens? He gets cured from his leprosy, from his psoriasis. And Elisha's helper, his name is Gehazi. Gehazi goes and he asks the general to give him a present, pretending that he's talking in behalf of the prophet. Elisha finds out that Gehazi went to ask a present for the cure, for the healing from the general. Elisha curses Gehazi and he says, the leprosy that happened to Naaman will now go to you and all your kids. And Gehazi and his kids become covered in leprosy and they are sitting outside of the gate. At that time, there is a war that's being waged against Samaria. And the city is being sieged from all corners. No one is allowed to leave the city. There's a famine. People are dying. The story goes that the king goes outside and women are begging him for food. And he says, what are you eating? And he says, me and my friend, one day we're going to eat my child. One day we're going to eat her child. And he realizes how bad the famine is. And the reason why they can't win the war is because they have the power of the prophet Elisha in their midst. So the king wants to kill Elisha. He wants to throw him out of the gates of the city. And Elisha says, don't worry about it. Tomorrow it's all going to be over. Following day, something happens. There's a noise within the nation, within the army of Aram. The whole fled. This Haftorah begins. There were four people with leprosy sitting outside of the city walls of Samaria. And they were very hungry. They were also part of the famine. They were starving. And the Talmud says it was Gehazi and his three sons. And because they were so desperate for food, they decided to go into the tents of the army of Aram and they basically surrender and say, we want to be part of you. We are hungry. And when they arrived, suddenly they saw that there's no soldiers. Everybody fled. So they came running back to the city to give the news that there's no enemy outside. And when the gates opened up and everybody goes and they find out they left everything. They left all their food. They left all their provisions. The army of the enemy fled. What do we see here? We see as a person, a questionable person. Him and his sons were not good people. They were Metzoraim. But they became the announcers. They became the ones who brought the news of salvation to the entire Jewish people. When you watch someone, a child or an adult, talking, saying things you shouldn't be saying, speaking out of anger, you could look at him and say, okay, I'm watching an angry man, a terrible person, horrible. Let's shut him down. Let's just gog him so he couldn't speak anymore. Or you could have a change of heart. You could say, you know what? I'm going to borrow the glasses. for my friend, the Kohen, for a moment. And I'm going to treat that with love. I will see the human that's behind this pain. And I might hear something that I didn't hear before. I might hear something, a message of redemption. We have to access right now, this moment, we have to access a lot of love, each and every one of us. It's not easy to be alive even in this generation. But when we open up our hearts to each other, when we let ourselves not be in that rowdy, angry conversation that's happening on the street, when we use our mouth, Pesach, purifying our speech, refining our expressions, we create a channel. We open up those walls, the treasures are hidden behind it. It doesn't feel like it. You look at Mashiach, you see leprosy. You look at the temple, you see leprosy. You look at Moshe, you hear about leprosy. You look at Miriam, there is leprosy. But you just have to let that unfold. And there is a huge light shining right beneath that. Sometimes you will get the information. Sometimes you just have to harness the attitude and access that Cohen glasses, Dr. Cohen glasses, and begin treating the world around you with a little bit more love, a little bit more understanding. And that's how the light will start coming through. So at least if we make a commitment as our group here, those who are here today and those who will listen to this class, to begin shifting a little bit. Watching less television, listening less to the politicians, and just connecting more to our hearts. I think we're going to start seeing the light in each other. And suddenly, things will become really easy and special. And we will find the treasures that each and every one of us has within him. God Almighty bless you all to have a happy and kosher Pesach. Use the holiday, use the energy of the holiday to be in the expression of all the good that this holiday carries.